The tail of Jack Harper's battered Ford pickup fishtails on thin ice snow, spraying like shattered glass across the windshield. He slams on the brakes and the world tilts. The wipers screech, the engine groans, and the sleet pounds the roof with relentless fury. Dead ahead, half buried in drifts, a rusted shipping container yawns open. A faint rap like knuckles desperate for rescue echoes against its creaking metal. Heart hammering, Jack throws the truck into park, yanks the driver's door, and battles through the knee-deep snow. Each footstep is a muted drumbeat of urgency. He reaches the container's hinge and flings it wide. Inside, two pale faces stare back, twin girls curled on a filthy blanket, their eyes wide with shock and relief. If this opening got your pulse racing, let us know below, hit subscribe, and follow for the next chapters of this unforgettable journey. Jack Harper's cabin sat at the edge of Pine Ridge, like a solitary lighthouse in a white sea. He dropped Lily and Nora gently onto the snow-dusty threshold, scooping the smaller twin a whisper of a girl into his arms. The sharp slap of wind on his coat snapped him into focus. Inside the wood stove's orange glow fought back the cold. His daughter Emma hovered by the hearth silent as driftwood, her dark eyes hollow with years of unspoken words. Jack laid the twins on a threadbare quilt and sent a shaft of wood into the fire. Sparks spiraled up the blackened chimney like tiny fireflies. In the hush, only the twins' soft hiccuping broke the silence. He fetched steaming mugs of cocoa, each breath of warmth fogging the rims, and settled them in front of the girls. "Name?" he asked, voice rough from cold. Lily, the older twin, whispered, her lips quivering. "I'm Nora." "How old?" Jack probed gently. "Almost 10, Lily said. "Nora's 9 3/4. He nodded, offering a faint smile. "Numbers matter, huh?" The twins exchanged glances, uncertainty folding between them like snowbanks. Then Lily spoke, breath like a quiet storm. "Please, don't tell them we're here." Emma watched from the corner, her shoulders taut. 2 years of selective mutism had trained her to observe rather than feel. Yet something in the twins' trembling vulnerability pricked at her. Jack noticed Emma's gaze and hoped the girl's presence might be the key to unlock the silence that had become her daughter's fortress. "Warm up first," he said to the twins, wrapping an extra wool blanket around their shoulders. Then to Emma, "You okay?" He didn't expect words, only a flicker of response. Emma's eyes softened just a fraction. At the rough-hewn table, the three huddled over cocoa steam curling like whispered promises. Jack watched Lily trace icy patterns on the window pane and saw Nora's gaze drift to the piano tucked against the far wall. A piano that had not sung in this house since Emma stopped speaking. Once the twins drifted into sleep on the pull-out couch, Jack lingered by the stove, cradling an untouched cup of coffee. The scent of pine and cinnamon toast drifted through the room. He allowed himself a moment of memory, his late wife's laughter, the way her fingers danced along ivory keys, coaxing melodies out of thin air. Then he turned toward the piano and wiped a hand over its dusty lid. The instrument was a relic of happier days, its keys yellowed but intact. Next morning, dawn arrived in muted gray. Jack rose on instinct, knee-deep in habit before memory. Emma sat at the kitchen table, back straight, hands folded, eyes fixed on her own steaming mug. She didn't touch it, but Jack saw her inhale the scent and feel something stir. He placed a chipped red plate in front of Emma and a green one for himself. Then he lifted the lid of the piano and pressed middle C. The note rang out clear, a solitary voice cutting through half-light. Jack winced at how raw it sounded, but Emma's chin lifted. The room felt less empty. "The girls can stay," he said softly, half to himself. Emma's fingers curled around the mug, her silent yes. Over oatmeal and burnt toast, Lily and Nora chattered quietly about snowmen and school projects. Emma watched from the threshold, shadows of curiosity flickering in her eyes. When Nora offered Emma a piece of buttered toast and smiled, Emma didn't step forward, but she didn't step back either. After breakfast, Jack led the twins outside to build a snow fort by the woodshed. He handed them bright red sleds, their laughter cut through the cold like sunlight through clouds. Emma lingered at the doorway, shoulders tense. Finally, Lily spotted her and waved. Emma blinked, surprised to find herself grinning. She nodded once, then joined them, shoes crunching on frozen grass. Jack watched the three girls dig tunnels and heap walls of snow. He felt the weight in his chest ease like a door sliding open after years of rust. Two frightened twins, a silent daughter, and the bitter wind gave way to solidarity. In that moment, he realized the first note wasn't just a sound. It was a promise that music might heal more than empty rooms. It could heal people. By late afternoon, the fort stood complete, a fragile battlement crowned with icicle spears. Emma flipped a snowball at Nora, who squealed and chased her back to the cabin. Jack followed, heart lighter than it had been in years. The stove crackled, the twins sipped cocoa, and Emma perched on the piano bench, fingertips hovering above the keys. Jack caught her eye and gave the smallest nod of encouragement. Emma closed her eyelids, inhaled, and pressed down. A single hesitant note drifted into the room. Lily and Nora hushed mid-sip. Jack let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. The note hung in the air, fragile as frost, but undeniably there. And in that moment, Jack Harper understood that every journey, no matter how long the silence, begins with a single courageous sound. The door closed with a gust of Arctic wind that rattled the thin panes of Jack Harper's cabin windows. Inside, the warmth from the wood stove felt miraculous, as though it were a hearth resurrected from an older, kinder world. Jack dropped his snow-damp coat onto a hook by the door and dried his gloves on the leg of his jeans, then turned to Lily and Nora. The twins stood huddled together on the threshold, faces pale and eyes wide, clothing sodden from the frozen landscape outside. Jack knelt before them, brushing aside damp locks as gently as he could, and wrapped each in the oversized flannel he'd worn for decades. The heavy cotton settled around their shoulders like a promise you're safe now. By the red brick stove, the sisters clutched steaming mugs of cocoa that Jack had poured with his work-worn hands. The chocolate scent mingled with pine-smoked linen curtains, and the sharp tang of winter scrubbed clean by sleet. Lily blew carefully on the surface of her drink, eyes drifting toward a half-visible photograph on the mantel. Jack, younger and smiling, his arm around a woman with kind eyes, and a guitar resting against her knee. The piano her fingers once played was across the room, its ivory keys yellowed, but waiting. Jack sank into a battered armchair, cocoa in hand, and studied the twins. His daughter Emma sat at the edge of the hearth, knees drawn under her chin. She watched them through dark lashes, silent but attentive. Jack cleared his throat, uncertain where to begin. The twins' raven hair mirrored Emma's, but their skin was more porcelain, eyes wider. Lily, the older by a few months, set her mug down on the low wooden table with a timid clink. "My name's Emma Harper." Jack began, voice low as driftwood. "This is my daughter." Emma didn't rise or speak. She simply lifted her gaze and offered a small nod. Jack turned back to Lily and Nora. "Why were you out there?" Lily swallowed a gulp of cocoa before answering. "We stayed with our aunt, Carla. She said if we cried again, she'd leave us in the woods." Her voice was a single breath, brittle but unbroken. She folded her arms inside Jack's coat loops. Nora, smaller, pressed her lips together and looked anywhere but at Jack. Jack felt something tighten in his chest. He thought of how grief had hollowed this cabin after his wife's passing, how Emma's silence had become a fortress he could neither scale nor breach. Yet here were these girls wearied beyond their years, and suddenly he saw the steel beneath their fear. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it. He hadn't felt this sorry in years. "I can't imagine what that's like. But you're safe here." Lily gave a small, uncertain half-smile. "We thought you'd tell her," she said, glancing at Emma. "Tell someone where we are." Emma shifted on the hearth's edge, a subtle movement that felt monumental. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, but still said nothing. Jack offered Lily and Nora new blankets, pulled an extra log from a nearby stack, and fed it into the stove. Flames roared, licking the metal pipe that climbed toward the ceiling. Heat blossomed outward, erasing the chill from the air and coaxing color back into the twins' cheeks. Over the next hour, Jack learned that Carla was their only living relative. An aunt who drank too deeply, was strange around children, and spoke of them as burdens. Lily quietly confessed that she and Nora had crept out one night when Carla slept, hoping to find help on the old highway. Instead, they'd collapsed against the rail of the abandoned container, thinking the wind might carry a prayer. Jack listened, feeling the simple act of listening grow heavy with responsibility. Emma, meanwhile, left her throne by the fire and hovered near the couch where the twins sat. She picked at the hem of her shirt, then reached down to straighten Lily's blanket without looking at her. Lily caught the movement and offered Emma a mug. Emma's hand hovered, then closed around the mug's handle. The warmth seeped into her palm, and Jack held his breath. Emma took a sip, and the room shifted. Jack stood and moved to a low bookshelf lined with tattered volumes and mementos. He found a board game, an old favorite Chutes and Ladders, and dusted it off. "Who's up for a quick game?" he asked, offering the box to Lily. Her eyes lit with a spark of mischief, and Nora giggled a soft sound like wind chimes in a blizzard. Emma sat beside the couch, unwrapping the box with careful fingers. Rules were rediscovered, dice rolled, and laughter fluttered across the cabin like startled birds. At one point, Nora tumbled her token all the way to the laughing sea monster she'd slid the wrong chute and burst into giggles. Emma cracked a grin so small Jack nearly missed it, but it was there tugging at the corners of her lips. The twins pointed at Emma's victory token, and Emma bumped tokens with them, a silent fist bump that felt more triumphant than any trophy. Afterward, Jack retrieved a worn blanket from a trunk in the corner and draped it over all four of them on the couch. The firelight danced on the walls, turning shadows into moving murals. He sat back and watched Emma lean her head on Lily's shoulder. Lily reached out a hand and Emma took it. Jack closed his eyes for a moment, memories of better times flickering like embers in his mind. Then Lily and Nora began to hum a soft, unplanned melody, two voices weaving together in harmony. Emma's head lifted, her breath caught, and she joined in, adding a third tentative thread. The notes trembled but held firm, echoing off log walls and stone floorboards. Jack felt tears blur his vision, tears not of sorrow, but of something more profound hope. As the final note faded into the hush, Emma exhaled and closed her eyes, resting her cheek against Lily's. Nora leaned forward to tuck stray hair behind Emma's ear. Jack saw the unspoken truth in their tender gestures. These girls, abandoned and frightened, and this mute daughter wounded by grief, had found in each other a flicker of warmth brighter than any fire. Jack rose to refill their cocoa mugs, listening to their soft chatter about ordinary things, favorite school subjects, snow forts they built that day, dreams of spring thawing. Emma's voice trailed through their words like a delicate silver thread, fragile yet undeniable. Jack realized that in rescuing Lily and Nora, he and Emma had been rescued too. The cabin, once heavy with silence and loss, now pulsed with life and possibility. When the stove's embers glowed low, Jack stood at the doorway watching the sisters curl up under layers of blankets, and Emma tucked them in with the care of an older sister. He felt the weight of the night's promise settle over him. Warmth could be shared, voices could be rediscovered, and family could be rebuilt. One small act of kindness at a time. He closed the door against the wind and stood in the gathering dark, letting the glow of the cabin windows be his guide. Inside, their laughter drifted outward, a beacon that cut through the winter's gloom. And in that moment, Jack Harper knew that the flicker of warmth glowing in his weathered cabin was just the beginning of the light they would kindle together. Emma Harper sat on the edge of her narrow bed, the quilt pulled up to her waist, as though it could shield her from the world beyond her door. The thin walls of her room were lined with half-forgotten posters, faded concert flyers, pages torn from music magazines, a photograph of her mother strumming the guitar by the lake house. 2 years had passed since she'd last spoken, since laughter and conversation had dissolved into echoes she no longer recognized as her own. Her posture was rigid, arms locked at her sides, as if she feared that even the slightest movement might shatter the fragile silence she'd constructed around herself. Below, Jack's voice drifted up the stairs. He was moving the twins' blankets, checking on them before bed. Emma closed her eyes against the hush, willing herself not to sink into the old fear that settled in her chest like ice. Someone had to keep watch, she reminded herself, a silent sentinel guarding two little sisters and a father worn thin by grief. This was her role now, and she clung to it as if definition alone could keep her safe. A soft tapping came at her door. Emma didn't turn. She could hear Lily's trembling voice carrying through the wood. "Emma, are you okay?" The knock came again, gentle this time. Jack's deeper tone followed. "Hey, honey, just checking in." Emma's fingers tightened on the quilt. She didn't trust her voice. She didn't trust how much she might tremble or if the words would come at all. Stillness had become her armor, and she wrapped it tightly around her ribs. For 2 years it had protected her from the laughter that once cut too close, from the whispers behind her back, and from the weight of her mother's absence. But tonight felt different. Lily and Nora were safe. The fire's glow shone through her bedroom curtains like a beacon. Something warm pulsed in the walls of the cabin, calling to her. She inhaled slowly, letting memories stir her mother's laugh, the piano afternoon recitals lit by late spring sunshine, Jack's voice teaching her her first chords on that same piano. It wasn't that she'd forgotten how to speak, it was that she'd forgotten why she should. She stood bare feet touching the cool wooden floor and eased the door open an inch. Jack hovered in the hallway, silhouetted by the firelight behind him. Lily and Nora lay curled together on the couch, their blankets tucked tight. Jack met Emma's eyes and offered a small smile of encouragement. He didn't push her to come down. He simply waited, trusting her to choose. Emma drew a trembling breath and stepped out. Her bedroom door clicked softly behind her, and the quiet crack before returning to hush felt like a drumbeat she hadn't felt in years. She descended the stairs slowly, each footfall reverberating in her ears. At the bottom she paused, heart hammering against her ribs. The cabin's warmth enveloped her, but she still shivered as much from nerves as from leftover cold. Jack crouched beside the twins, smoothing Lily's hair back from her forehead. When he noticed Emma, he stood and motioned her to the piano bench. Emma's breath caught. The piano sat untouched since her mother's passing, its ivory keys yellowed with time. She'd promised herself she'd never touch it again. Too many memories lived in those chords. Yet Jack's silent invitation nudged something loose. Emma's legs carried her forward, muscles taut but willing. She perched on the bench and rested her fingers atop the keys, not pressing them, but feeling the smooth silk beneath her skin. Lily and Nora sat up, eyes wide, mugs of cocoa forgotten in their laps. Jack stood behind Emma's chair, hand resting on the piano's polished side. In the silence, Emma braced herself. The twins' gazes felt like wind on her face, gentle, insistent. She closed her eyes and let her fingers fall. Middle C sounded a clear, solitary note that trembled the air. It wasn't a melody, it was a breath, an exhale of something buried. Lily whispered Emma as if afraid to break the moment. Emma's eyes fluttered open. She pressed another key, letting the note linger. Lily nodded, hope blooming in her chest. Nora slid down off the couch and sat cross-legged at Emma's feet, watching the white key under Emma's thumb. Jack leaned closer. Just like old times, he said quietly. The promise in his voice wavered but held firm. Emma's throat tightened. She pressed 2 more notes, finding a simple progression C-E-G, and a chord formed beneath her fingers. The twins exchanged smiles. Emma inhaled so deeply her shoulders lifted, then exhaled into the piano. The chord rang clear, echoing through the room like a revival. A single tear traced down Emma's cheek. She blinked it away, but the dam had broken. She lifted her head and the world felt different, as though each creak of the cabin's logs, each crackle of the fire was urging her forward. She pressed a series of notes, stumbling at first, but the pattern held. The chord progression resolved into a tentative melody. Emma's fingers found ease, coaxing the song out of silence. Lily and Nora edged closer, their cocoa mugs clinking onto the floor. They perched on either side of Emma, nodding encouragement. Emma's shoulders relaxed her back, straightened her eyes alight with a rediscovered joy. She hadn't intended to sing, but as the melody formed, she felt the urge bubble up, a soft, wavering sound, hesitant but undeniably hers. The cabin. The moonlight slanted through the frost-laced windows, painting the cabin floor in silver bars. Inside, the fire had dwindled to embers, and the only sound was the soft breathing of Lily and Nora tucked beneath a quilt on the couch. Jack Harper had left for a moment to fetch more wood, leaving the twins alone with Emma's old piano, its battered bench a familiar invitation in the hush. Lily shifted on the edge of the couch, her twin's hand slipping into hers. "I used to sing this for Nora when she was scared," Lily whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. She lifted her head and closed her eyes, the memory pulling her forward. From her lips came a simple hum, low and tender, like the gentle rocking of a cradle. The notes wavered at first, uncertain, but her confidence grew as she found the thread of the melody. Nora leaned closer, eyes shining in the half-light. She joined with a trembling harmony, her voice thinner, more faltering but perfectly matched to Lily's hum. The 2 notes intertwined, curling around one another like ivy on old wood. The lullaby rose and fell, a private lullaby that spoke of safety in the dark. From the landing above the door to Emma's room creaked open. A narrow sliver of her silhouette appeared in the doorway, shoulders squared, hair loose around her face, eyes drawn by the raw beauty of unpolished voices. She took a hesitant step forward, bare feet padding quietly on the floorboards. Lily's hum faltered when she saw Emma, as if the music itself held its breath. Nora's harmony caught in her throat. For a heartbeat, the cabin was utterly still, but for the chord hanging in the air. Then Lily smiled, and the melody lifted again, richer and more assured. Emma paused on the threshold, the lullaby brushing against long-buried memories of her mother's voice of afternoons by the lake house, when music had been a living, breathing thing in their home. The twins fell silent at the last note, warming the quiet rather than breaking it. Emma moved closer, drawn by the promise of something she had thought lost forever. She approached the piano, every step measured, as if the instrument might shatter under her touch. At the bench she hovered should she sit. The twins watched breathless. Jack returned with 2 lengths of birch, pausing in the doorway, to see Lily and Nora holding Emma's gaze as though urging her on. Emma exhaled and perched on the edge of the bench. She placed her fingers on the ivory keys not to play, but to feel their cool solidity beneath her skin. Lily offered a gentle nod. Nora gave a soft thumbs up. With that silent blessing, Emma pressed her thumb into the middle C key. It chimed out, ringing clear and bell-like in the stillness. Lily hummed again softly, and Nora joined in, weaving their voices around Emma's single note. Emma's other fingers found supporting chords, tentative at first, then gathering strength. The lullaby they'd sung without words now bloomed under Emma's touch. She pressed a sequence of keys that matched Lily's hum, and the twins' voices rose beneath her fingers in a gentle counterpoint. Jack set the stack of logs beside the stove, watching the scene with quiet wonder. The fire crackled once as if applauding. Emma's shoulders eased the tension of her last 2 years, slipping away with every note. A single tear rolled down her cheek, catching the firelight, and she brushed it away but did not stop playing. Lily and Nora closed their eyes, their voices harmonizing in perfect unplanned unison. When the final chord lingered and dissolved into silence, the cabin held its breath. Then Lily reached over and took Emma's hand, her small fingers fitting around the larger ones. "Thank you," she whispered, voice thick with awe. Nora nestled against Emma's side, pressing her face to Emma's sleeve. In that moment, Emma felt a warmth she had not known since childhood, a connection deeper than words. Jack moved to stand beside the piano, resting a hand on Emma's shoulder. He didn't speak, knowing no words could match the power of what had just unfolded. He simply let his presence echo his pride. Emma rose from the bench, and the twins scrambled to their feet, wrapping her in a hug so tight it seemed to stitch their hearts together. The fire sputtered, sending sparks swirling into the chimney. Jack stoked the embers, and the twins scrambled to bring more blankets from the pile on the couch, draping them around Emma as though she were the most precious snowflake on earth. Emma, releasing the tension in her limbs, closed her eyes and let herself lean into the hush that followed. Jack led them to the kitchen, where he poured fresh mugs of cocoa. The steam curled upward, mingling with the soft glow of oil lamps as he arranged the mugs in a triangle on the worn wooden table. Emma sat between Lily and Nora, her palms cradling the mug like a talisman. She let the warmth spread through her, a tangible reminder that she was here, alive and part of something new. Lily nudged Nora, and the twins exchanged conspiratorial glances. Then Nora raised her mug in a mock toast. Emma caught on and echoed the gesture, her first deliberate action in years. They sipped in unison, the cocoa's sweetness dissolving any lingering doubt. "I never thought I'd hear that again," Jack said, voice thick as he leaned against the countertop. "You've got magic in your bones, Em." Emma dared a small smile. The nickname, a relic of her childhood, felt like a gift. She met Jack's eyes and gave a barely perceptible nod. Lily and Nora cheered quietly, their faces alight. Jack cleared his throat. "How about a bedtime story?" he offered. "Something other than lullabies." Emma glanced at the twins. Their eyes were heavy, but their spirits soared. She took a deep breath, and to everyone's surprise began to speak. Her voice was soft, trembling at first, but unmistakably hers. She told them of her favorite storybook as a child, A Tale of a Nightingale Who Sang to the Stars. With each sentence, her confidence grew. Lily and Nora leaned in, rapt, as though the words themselves were miracles. When the story ended, Emma caught Jack's eye. He offered a proud grin, and Lily clapped so quietly her hands barely made a sound. Nora yawned, burrowed into her sister's side, and Emma stood guiding the twins toward the couch. Jack collected the cocoa mugs, stacking them by the sink. Emma tucked Lily and Nora under the quilt, brushing hair from their foreheads. She bent to kiss each on the cheek, her lips soft against their skin. Nora murmured a muffled goodnight, and Lily's eyelids fluttered shut, curled against her sister. Emma lingered, her hand resting gently on their blankets. Jack appeared at the doorway, and Emma nodded. No words needed. Jack flicked off the light, and the cabin fell into a darkness, warmed by embers and new bonds. As they ascended the stairs together, Lily and Nora clutched Emma's hands, their trust a fragile thread made unbreakable by shared song. Emma paused halfway up, turning to glance back. The piano sat silent once more, but it no longer seemed forlorn. Instead, it held the memory of voices rekindled, of a single note that unlatched two frightened hearts. Jack slipped an arm around Emma's shoulders. She leaned into him, her breath warm against his coat. "Thank you," she whispered, her first words of the evening, and Jack's chest swelled with a hope he'd thought lost. In the quiet that followed the cabin itself, seemed to hum a soft resonance, born of first hums, first words, and the promise of those yet to come. Jack Harper sat on the edge of his daughter's bed that night, the moonlight filtering through the thin curtains and painting ghostly patterns on the quilt. Emma lay still under the covers, two frightened twins curled up on the couch below, and for a moment the cabin felt suspended between past and future. He rose quietly, careful not to wake Emma or disturb the fragile peace, and walked back down the narrow hallway, his footsteps echoing softly against the worn wooden floorboards. The fire in the living room had burned low, leaving glowing embers that flickered in the hearth like the last sparks of a dying song. Jack paused beside the piano, his fingers resting on the dust-coated lid. He took a breath and opened it, half expecting the keys to collapse into disrepair. But the piano stood firm, inert, but ready as though waiting for the music to return. He crossed the room to a small bookshelf tucked into the corner, its shelves sagging under the weight of old manuals, half-read novels, and a leather-bound journal that had belonged to his wife. Next to the journal lay a battered recorder, one of those old reel-to-reel machines with a built-in microphone, the kind songwriters used before digital files made everything effortless. The recorder's surface was scuffed, the metal edges dulled by time and handling. Jack picked it up, feeling its unexpected weight in his hands. His wife's initials were etched into the metal plate on top, a reminder of the afternoon she'd spent capturing melodies and harmonies of the evenings when the three of them would huddle around a tape listening and laughing as the recorder's spool whirred. He dusted off the device with the sleeve of his flannel shirt, letting motes of dust drift in the lamplight like tiny stars. The recorder's lid creaked when he lifted it, revealing the empty spindle where old tapes had once spun. Jack's breath caught. He remembered her sitting by that same bookshelf, headphones on humming as she balanced the levels. He remembered the way she'd smile at him over the recorder's VU meter, that playful look in her eyes before she'd press record and let the microphone capture his rough chords. In the silence that followed her passing, the recorder had become a relic too painful to touch. He'd tucked it away, hiding it from his grief, as he had hidden the piano keys beneath tarps and the photographs behind blankets. Morning, he discovered, was not a single moment, but an echo that reverberated in the hollow spaces of every object. But tonight felt different. The hum of Lily and Nora's lullaby and Emma's first hesitant notes had rekindled something inside him. Music was no longer just memory and loss. It was a living thread connecting each of them. Jack ran his fingers over the recorder's controls. Record stop play, each button worn smooth by her fingertips. He found an old reel of tape on the lowest shelf still wound tight, its edge yellowed but intact. He held it in his palm, feeling the groove where the tape had cut from years of spinning. Gently, as though handling a newborn bird, he threaded the tape onto the recorder's spindles and closed the lid. The machine hummed to life with a soft mechanical whisper, as though surprised to be awake again. He pressed play first, uncertain what he'd hear. The tape clicked and hissed, then a voice, soft, warm, drifted through the cabin. It was her humming an unfinished melody, the same tune she'd tried to teach Emma one summer afternoon on the porch of the lake house. Jack's eyes stung with tears. He let the recorder run, listening to the hiss and crackle that framed her voice. He heard her laughter when the twins were born, the tiny first cries on another reel, and the sound of Emma singing a childish song that she had penned in her first grade. Those recordings had once filled the cabin with hope. Now they filled it again with possibility. He reached to stop the tape, but paused, letting her voice play through once more. Then cautiously, he pressed record and lifted the recorder's built-in mic toward the piano. He carried the machine to the instrument, setting it on the music stand. Clay dust settled from the piano's surface as he opened its lid, and he found himself inhaling the scent of old wood and memories. He pressed a key middle C and watched the recorder's meter spike in response. Then he found the chord progression. His wife had loved a simple I4V pattern that had been the foundation of so many late-night jams. His fingers moved almost of their own accord, coaxing the notes from the piano with a reverence he hadn't known he still possessed. Across the room, the twins stirred lids fluttering open at the sound. Emma sat up, hair tousled, blinking at the scene unfolding in the firelight. Jack finished the chord progression and let the final note linger in the air, then clicked the recorder off. The cabin fell silent save for the soft crackle of embers. No one spoke as Jack leaned against the piano, the recorder tucked under his arm like a precious gift. Emma slid from the couch and came to stand beside him. She did not speak, but she placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, understanding without words. Lily and Nora joined her, each clutching a corner of the piano bench. Together they formed a silent circle around the instrument faces, illuminated by the pale glow of moonlight and ember light. Jack cleared his throat. "I want you to hear something," he said softly, voice cracking. He set the recorder on the floor and pressed play. The tape whirred and the room filled once more with his wife's voice, then the faint strumming of his own guitar from a long-ago recording. Emma closed her eyes and swayed slightly. Lily and Nora listened with rapt attention. Jack watched as music like water filled every crevice of the cabin, drowning out the cold and fear. He pressed record again this time, capturing the moment, the three girls humming together, harmonizing their voices, imperfect but pure. When the recording ended, Jack lifted the mic and found Emma's gaze. She nodded, tears glistening on her lashes. He sat at the piano bench and patted the seat beside him. Emma climbed up and Jack handed her the mic. She pressed record on the recorder and placed the mic before her mouth. Her lips parted and a single trembling note emerged, soft as snowfall. Then Lily and Nora joined in, and their voices mingled into a trio of unrefined beauty. Jack's heart swelled as he watched Emma's shoulders straighten, her eyes bright with reclaimed courage. When they finished, Jack pressed stop. The tape in the recorder held the new layer of sound, the living echo of hope overlaid atop memory. He lifted the lid and reached for the tape, ready to rewind and play back what they'd just created. Emma knelt on the floor, leaning over the machine, her reflection fractured in the recorder's metal casing. Lily curled against Emma's side, Nora arching her head back to watch Jack thread the tape. The cabin felt smaller. Then three pairs of listening ears, one father's hands, and a machine that had become a vessel for their shared story. Jack's voice broke the hush. "We'll keep this," he said. "This will remind us of what Emma whispered, her voice trembling but clear." Jack closed his eyes. "That we're here," he said, "and that music can bring us back to life." Emma nodded, her hand finding his. Lily and Nora leaned in close, pressing their heads together in a silent affirmation of belonging. The recorder's red light glowed softly, promising many more moments to come. Jack reached out and lifted the tape from the spindles, carefully winding it back by hand. He labeled it Echoes of Hope in his late wife's script and slid it into a protective case. They sat together in the ember's light, four silhouettes bound by memory and promise. For the first time in years, Jack felt the stirrings of a future unburdened by grief. The recorder lay between them, a silent guardian of their past and keeper of their future songs. And the quiet that followed the cabin itself seemed to breathe its walls, whispering of new beginnings born from the echoes of the past. Dawn crept in pale and tentative through the frost-laced windows, painting the kitchen in gentle shades of gray and silver. Jack Harper stood by the stove, cradling a chipped enamel mug full of steaming cocoa in one hand and stirring oatmeal in the other. The twins Lily and Nora shuffled in on bare feet, their pajamas dusted with snowflakes that clung like tiny crystals. Emma Harper lingered at the threshold, arms folded across her chest, eyes distant but attentive. The silence felt less heavy this morning, lighter, almost hopeful. Jack ladled oatmeal into 3 mismatched bowls, one with a faded pine tree decal, another a pastel green chipped at the rim, and the third, Emma's plate deep red, its glaze worn away around the edges. He set them side by side on the scarred wooden table. Then he poured cocoa into 3 mugs, one for Lily Pink with a cartoon rabbit, one for Nora Sky Blue dotted with yellow stars, and one plain white chipped around the handle for Emma. The twins slid onto the bench, their elbows bumping as they settled. Emma stepped forward, heart beating so loudly she wondered if Jack could hear it. He caught her eye and offered a small nod as if to say, "Take your time, we're still here." Emma's hand hovered over the chipped red plate. The memory of nights she'd hidden in her room, afraid to touch anything that might echo her mother's absence, flickered through her mind. But today something was different. She reached out, fingertips brushing the cool ceramic, and lifted the plate. Jack exhaled softly, and the twins exchanged triumphant smiles. Emma settled into her seat, pulling the plate closer with deliberate care. The table, once a battleground of awkward glances and unspoken grief, felt strangely welcoming now. Jack set down the oatmeal, then pushed a mug of cocoa toward each girl. Steam rose in lazy spirals, carrying the scent of chocolate and cinnamon. Lily and Nora wrapped both hands around their mugs, letting the warmth seep through their fingertips. Jack poured his own cocoa and slid into the empty chair beside Emma. He stirred his drink, then took a measured sip. His eyes moved between the twins and his daughter, reading their faces for any flicker of doubt. Lily spooned oats, carefully humming under her breath. Nora's first bite was cautious too hot, but she blew on her spoon until a gentle plume rose, then ate with small, contented nods. Emma picked up her spoon, paused, and swirled it through the oatmeal. She left a trail in the creamy surface, a little path winding through rolled oats and raisins. Lily looked at her and offered a soft, "Is it good?" Emma's reply was a silent curve of her lips, but it was enough. Jack gave a wry grin. "We could open a cafe," he said, voice warm. 3 mugs of cocoa, special only at the Harper cabin. The girls giggled, the sound bright as wind chimes. Emma's eyes flicked to Jack, then to Lily and Nora. She let out a quiet laugh herself, the first time Jack had heard her voice in full conversational pitch since before the silence. It was only a giggle, but it rippled through the room, fracturing the last shadows. Jack set the table with a loaf of crusty bread and a dish of butter. He passed it around. Emma took a slice. Her movements measured but confident. She spread butter in careful strokes, watching it melt into golden rivulets. She broke off a corner, toasted against the stove's warmth, and bit into it. Nora draped an arm over Emma's chair. "Here," Nora said softly, passing over her napkin. Emma took it without speaking, folding it around her crumbs. The gesture was small, but in that cabin, small gestures carried the weight of 100 words. Jack cleared his throat. So he began, "What's the plan for today?" He braced himself for resignation, for Emma's old habits of retreating behind every question. But instead, Emma looked up, eyes steady. She tapped her spoon against her bowl and said, "Maybe we build another fort out back." Her voice was low but clear, the tremor gone. Lily's face lit up. "Yes, we can use those fallen branches by the woodshed." Nora nodded vigorously. Emma's suggestion was met with eager agreement. The twins abandoned their spoons and hopped off the bench. Emma rose too, glancing at Jack. He pushed back his chair and stood sliding an arm around her shoulders. "Then let's finish our breakfast and get to work," he said. They ate the last of their oatmeal in companionable silence, punctuated only by the occasional scrape of spoon against bowl or the hiss of the stove. Jack refilled their cocoa mugs, and the twins sipped slowly, savoring the sweetness. Emma traced a finger along the lip of her chipped red plate, then pushed it toward Jack. He tucked it into the sink, the plate's chipped edges catching the morning light, like a badge of endurance. As they rose from the table, Jack caught sight of the recorder perched on the piano in the corner. Echoes of Hope, labeled in his wife's handwriting. The machine reminded him of last night's recording session, Emma's reclaimed voice, the twins' harmonies, his own clumsy chords. It sat there as proof that music like morning light could seep through cracks and illuminate hidden places. Emma paused by the piano, running her hand over the recorder's metal casing. She pressed her palm to the instrument, then turned and gave Jack a small but genuine smile. Jack returned it with a nod charged with pride. Lily and Nora tugged at Emma's hands, beckoning her toward the door, already imagining the snow fort they would build. Emma looked back once more, stepping away from the recorder and toward new possibilities. Outside, the air was crisp and bright. The wind had died down, leaving the snow drifting peacefully. The twins raced ahead, their footprints weaving in and out of Jack's and Emma's as they headed for the pile of fallen branches. Jack and Emma followed Coco in hand, ready for the day's next small adventure. The cabin behind them stood warm and glowing, a beacon of newfound trust and togetherness. And inside, the chipped red plate rested in the sink, a silent testament to a breakfast truce, a fragile piece sealed by 3 mugs of cocoa, and the simple act of breaking bread together. The afternoon sun slanted through the dusty windows of the Harper garage, painting long rectangles of light across forgotten tool chests and stacks of lumber. Jack thought it might be good to show the twins his old board game collection, something to pass the hours until dinner. But before he'd even unpacked Monopoly, Lily had spied a battered Scrabble set tucked into a corner. They cleared a spot on an upturned crate, and soon the garage was alive with the click of wooden tiles, the clatter of dice, and a scattering of laughter that echoed off the corrugated walls. Emma hovered at the edge of the echo chamber, leaning against her father's vintage toolbox. The twins settled at the makeshift table, Nora rotating her tile rack this way and that, eyes bright with the prospect of spelling snowman for the highest score. Lily leaned in close, whispering strategy play, the X on the triple word space, but watch out for Dad's 3-letter bounce. Jack rumbled a chuckle as he rearranged his own letters, and for a moment the garage felt less like a dusty corner of the property and more like a cozy family room. But after a while the twins grew restless. Lily pushed back from the crate and rose to her feet. "I think Nora and I can build a word fortress out there," she declared, gesturing toward a stack of empty paint cans. Want to join Emma started to say no, as she often did, but something in Lily's eager smile stirred her curiosity. Jack nodded encouragement, and Emma stood brushing lint from her jeans. Scrabble pieces scattered across the crate, forgotten for now. They migrated to the far end of the garage where the ceiling arched high overhead, creating a natural chamber for sound. Jack pulled aside a tarp and revealed an old Adirondack chair, its weathered wood bleached by a dozen summers. He placed it beside the twins, then squatted low to pick up stray pieces of Scrabble dust. Emma followed, her breath catching slightly, as she crossed the threshold of the echo bar, the acoustic miracle of emptiness ready to transform the faintest whisper into a booming murmur. Lily tapped Nora on the shoulder and began humming a lullaby they'd taught Emma the night before. The melody rose softly at first, a single note droning A-flat that wavered like a bird fluttering its wings. Nora tilted her head and joined on the harmony, a sweet trembling second voice that fit against Lily's like 2 vines intertwining. The sound ricocheted from wall to wall, swelling with a richness that neither girl seemed quite prepared for. Emma paused in mid-step, her fingers brushing the air as though she could catch the hum in her palm. She watched Lily's lips move in time, watched Nora's face flush with delight at the resonance their voices created. Jack crouched beside her, half expecting Emma to retreat, but instead she took a hesitant step forward, eyes fixed on the twins' interwoven melody. A shift like shifting sands happened then, unspoken, irrevocable. Emma's chest rose with a slow intake of breath, and she closed the distance to the girls until they formed a loose triangle. She raised her hands as though to steady herself and let her lips part ever so slightly. A single note emerged, soft and wavering but unmistakably human, unmistakably hers. The note hung in the air, fragile as spun glass but undeniably whole. Lily's hum caught on the breath of Emma's note, and Nora wove her harmony beneath it. Suddenly the trio's voices formed a chord more beautiful than any Jack had heard since his wife's last recital at the lake house porch. His throat tightened. He could almost see the music, sculpted from the cool garage air, swirling around the 3 girls like the first glimpse of dawn. Emma's eyes widened at the sound she'd unleashed. She pressed a hand to her throat as if to feel the note tremble there, then planted both feet on the concrete floor and lifted her chin. Her second note was stronger, steadier, and the twins fell in around her, shifting from vertex to chorus, their voices a living fabric of sound. Jack rose slowly, careful not to break the fragile spell, and stood at the back of the echo chamber. He pressed a hand to the rough brick wall, feeling the vibrations travel through his palm and up his arm. This was it, the moment he'd hoped for after 2 long years of echoing silence in his daughter's room. The twins had given Emma more than a song, they'd given her a bridge back to herself. When the final chord faded into a gentle whisper, the garage returned to a hush so complete he could hear his own heartbeat. Emma stood motionless, eyes closed, as though savoring the memory of her voice. Lily reached over and brushed a stray lock of hair from Emma's face. Nora dropped her head to Emma's shoulder, and for a heartbeat they remained locked in that embrace of sound and silence. Jack stepped forward, each footfall solemn yet brimming with relief. He picked up the abandoned Scrabble board and tilted it so the girls could see the tiles still spelling Fortress. "That was the best game of Scrabble I've ever heard," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You three make a perfect team." Emma opened her eyes and cracked a small, triumphant smile. It was the first time Jack had seen her smile without restraint. She nodded once, a single decisive motion that said more than words ever could. Lily and Nora laughed softly, their breath mingling in the cool air, and Jack felt tears well behind his eyes. He collected the hymnal notebook from the crate, Emma's small journal of lyrics and scraps of melody, and handed it to her. "You might want to write this down," he said gently. Emma took the notebook with a measured nod, clutching it as though it were the most precious thing in the world. She flipped to a blank page and pressed pen to paper, scribbling a few words in careful script. Jack knelt beside her, peering over her shoulder. She'd written 3 voices, 1 song, echoing hope. He read the phrase aloud. Echoing hope, he repeated, letting the words settle like seeds in fertile soil. Emma glanced up, her eyes glistening, and Jack laid a hand on her shoulder. Outside, the sun began its descent, casting the garage in a golden glow. Lily hopped off the chair and stretched Nora, copying her every move. Emma closed her notebook, tucking it inside her jacket pocket. Jack gathered the game pieces and swept them into the Scrabble box. He eyed the pile of logs by the door. They'd need the fire lit again before evening, but he lingered, savoring the afterglow of their impromptu concert. "Dinner's in an hour," Jack called as he turned toward the house. "Let's head inside and get warmed up." Lily grabbed Nora's hand and they scampered for the exit. Voices trailing behind them in cheerful conversation. Emma paused in the doorway, her gaze drifting back to the echo chamber where her voice had found its wings. Jack stood behind her, shoulders relaxed for the first time in years. As they stepped back into the warm glow of the cabin, Jack realized that the twins had done more than unlock melodies. They'd unlocked his daughter's voice, and with it, a whole new chapter of their lives. The echo-filled garage was silent once more, but its walls seemed to hum with possibility, resonating with the promise of every note yet to be sung. The living room was strewn with sofa pillows, blankets, and every mismatched cushion Jack could find. Emma sat perched on the edge of an armchair that had once been upholstered in faded plaid. Lily and Nora flanked her on the couch, tummies planted on pillows, like triumphant mountaintop hikers. Jack had cleared a space in front of the fireplace to serve as their stage, and the soft glow of string lights once hung in the attic for holiday parties lent the scene a warm, hopeful shimmer. They'd spent the last hour transforming the room. A broomstick became a microphone stand, a folding chair, the perfect piano bench substitute, and a worn rug, the center stage where their harmonies would shine. Emma ran her fingers through her hair, smoothing stray strands, as if she already knew how it should look under real stage lights. Lily fiddled with a makeshift spotlight, an oil lamp perched atop a crate, while Nora adjusted the balance of pillows on the floor, arranging soft tiers like theater seats for an invisible audience. Jack watched from the doorway, leaning against the jam arms crossed over his flannel shirt. The fire crackled behind him, sending occasional sparks up the chimney. In the lamplight, the girls looked radiant eyes, bright cheeks flushed their breath, pluming in the chill air of the cabin. He remembered that look years ago on Emma's face when she first discovered the piano keys under her fingers. Back then, a single note had felt like a miracle. Now there were 3 voices weaving together, their confidence blooming with each practice run. Emma cleared her throat. "Ready?" she asked, her voice steady but soft. Lily gave a nod and turned to Nora. On 3, Lily whispered. She counted silently on her fingers, then cupped her hands around her mouth. 1, 2, 3. Nora began with a low hum. Lily joined in with a higher counter melody, and Emma's clear soprano rose above them like a ribbon of light. The harmonies swelled, filling the room with a resonance that made Jack's chest ache with pride. Their voices bounced off the walls, settling in every corner of the cabin where silence had once reigned. When the final chord drifted into a hush, the twins burst into giggles. Emma tilted her head back and laughed, the sound lifting Jack's heart. He stepped forward, clapping, and the girls froze, surprised by his presence, perhaps, but mostly by the genuine warmth in his applause. "That was incredible," Jack said, voice thick. "You three could fill an auditorium." Lily beamed. "We could write. Imagine it, real stage, real lights, people applauding." She waved her arms expansively, carpet fibers swirling around her feet. "It would be like magic." Nora hopped off her pillow and raced to Jack's side. "There's a talent show at school next month, Mr. Harper," she said, cheeks rosy. "We could sign up together." Jack's blood ran cold. "Talent show." His voice rumbled low. "School talent show at your old elementary building." Emma stiffened beside her father. A chill passed through the room that had nothing to do with winter air. Jack's memories spooled backward, the day Emma froze on that school stage, the whispers, the laughter that had chased her off before she could finish her solo. He remembered the way her shoulders had slumped, her eyes gone distant. That day her voice had left her forever, or so it had seemed. He swallowed hard. "I don't know if that's a good idea," he said quietly. "Talent shows can be cruel. People laugh when they don't understand beauty, and that laugh can cut deeper than silence ever did." Lily's excitement faltered, but did not die. She turned to Emma, eyes wide with resolve. "But that's exactly why we should do it. When they hear us, they'll see our harmony. Our song, they won't laugh." Nora nodded fiercely. "We've got 3 voices. We're strong together. We're not alone." Emma looked between the 2 girls and then at Jack. Her eyes glistened not with fear, but with something new, determination. "I'm not afraid anymore," she said, voice soft but clear. Jack's heart clenched anew. He'd longed to see that spark had built this cabin, brought in the twins, hoping to reignite it. But now that it shimmered in Emma's eyes, he felt a surge of both pride and fear. "Emma," he began, but she lifted a hand to stop him. She slid from her chair and squared her shoulders. "Dad, you taught me that music isn't a performance. It's sharing who we are. If we share together, they'll understand." Jack's throat tightened. He searched her face and saw not the fragile child who'd retreated, but the young woman who'd found her voice. He glanced at Lily and Nora, who stood expectantly beside Emma, their hands linked in solidarity. The fire crackled with promise. The cabin's walls, lined with photographs and dusty instruments, seemed to lean in listening. He closed his eyes, breathing deep. He thought of his wife and how she had always believed the world needed to hear honest voices. He thought of all the nights he'd sat alone, music dormant, longing for a spark. And then he thought of Emma, Lily, and Nora. 3 voices echoing hope in a lonely cabin, and he realized that hope was stronger than fear. Jack opened his eyes and placed a hand on Emma's shoulder. "All right," he said, voice steady. "Let's do it." Lily squealed and hugged Emma, and Nora wrapped her arms around both of them. Emma smiled, a radiant beam that lit every corner of the room. Jack stepped back, heart pounding with a fierce pride. He pictured the school auditorium, its creaky wooden stage, the harsh fluorescent lights, and felt a thrill of excitement mixed with apprehension. "That means we have to rehearse properly," Jack said, as though finding practical ground to anchor their dream. "We'll need to set a schedule, pick our song list, practice every afternoon until we know it by heart." The twins cheered and Emma chuckled softly. "I have some ideas," she said, pulling her lyric notebook from her jacket pocket. "I wrote a new song last night, something for the silent. I think it would fit." Jack took the notebook and flipped through pages filled with careful script verses penned in the quiet hours, lines that spoke of fear and hope and the power of being heard. He read the chorus aloud. "In the stillness of our voices lies the strength to be found." He looked up at Emma, his eyes misty. "That's perfect." Emma nodded, cheeks pink. Lily and Nora gathered around the notebook, pointing at lines and humming potential harmonies. Jack felt a surge of gratitude. In their living room turned stage around a cluster of sofa pillows, 3 girls had kindled a fire that no winter frost could extinguish. He sank onto the arm of the couch, watching them plan out practice times and discuss costumes, simple black dresses with matching scarves, perhaps, or coordinating winter hats emblazoned with snowflakes. Every detail fed their excitement, the way they would walk onto the stage, who would start the song, how they would end with a silent bow that spoke louder than words. Jack realized that despite his fears, he was just as eager. The thought of Emma Lily and Nora standing together under a spotlight, sharing their song with a room full of strangers, filled him with a fierce protective pride. He would be there in the front row recording every moment, ready to catch Emma if she faltered, cheering the loudest when her voice soared. As the girls finalized their plan, night fully settled, and the cabin lights casting long shadows, Jack reached for the lyric notebook and tucked it safely beside him. The twins hugged Emma one more time, their perfect harmony fading into soft conversation. Emma leaned against her father's shoulder, content to plan tonight and practice tomorrow. Jack slid an arm around her and kissed the top of her head. The fire in the hearth crackled low, a steady heartbeat in the quiet room. Outside, the wind had died down, leaving the world blanketed in silent snow. Inside, their voices had found choral strength, and their dreams had taken shape amidst sofa pillows and string lights. Jack folded his hands in his lap, eyes shining as he gazed at his daughter's determined face. "We'll make this our best performance yet," he said softly, voice rich with promise. Emma nestled closer, her notebook clutched to her chest, and for once, the silence that had shadowed her life felt like a distant memory, replaced by the vivid sound of three voices daring to dream together. Under the warm glow of the auditorium's orange velvet lights, the old stage seemed to hum with history. Worn floorboards bore witness to countless recitals and speeches, but tonight felt different, alive with possibility. Backstage, Emma Harper stood between Lily and Nora, the three of them pressing close like a single bouquet of hope. Emma's hand trembled slightly on the microphone stand, and Lily slipped her a reassuring smile. Nora adjusted the scarf tied around her sister's wrist, tugging it once like a talisman. Jack Harper waited just off stage, guitar slung low across his chest, every heartbeat echoing the quiet promise they shared. A soft voice crackled through the speakers. "Please welcome the Silent Three." The trio exchanged one last breath and then stepped into the light together. The auditorium's air was still hundreds of faces fixed on them, rows of chairs dissolving into darkness beyond the flood of stage lamps. Emma swallowed her chest tight, then lifted her chin. She remembered late nights of humming in the garage, mornings warmed by cocoa, and gentle encouragement, the recorder's reel spinning with their first harmonies. Whatever came next, they had earned this moment. Jack strummed a low chord from stage left, the guitar's voice a warm undercurrent. Emma closed her eyes and inhaled deeply, bringing every ounce of courage into her lungs. Then her lips parted and a single clear note rang out, a fragile seed of melody that blossomed against the auditorium's hush. Lily and Nora joined in, weaving their voices around Emma's with a tenderness born of shared struggle. Their harmony wasn't perfect. Each breath caught in midair, each chord slightly unpolished, but therein lay its power. Raw, human, unvarnished beauty. Emma's second verse carried the weight of every silenced tear she'd ever held back. The twins' gentle undercurrents buoyed her up, lifting her voice higher, lending strength where doubt had once lived. Jack's guitar chords rose and fell in steady support, a rhythmic heartbeat pulsing beneath their song. The lyrics spoke of broken wings mended by song of voices once afraid, now soaring freely. Words that had been written in late-night notebooks found flight on this stage, dancing on the warm air before the silent crowd. As the final chorus approached, Lily stepped forward, her alto coloring the melody with bright ribbons of sound. Nora's soft harmony layered beneath a tender foundation that felt like home. Emma stood center stage, her eyes shining, and delivered the climactic line. "We were made for music even when silence held us tight." The trio held the chord, letting the notes ripple through the auditorium like slow-motion waves. Time seemed to stretch the silence after the last note, filling every space between heartbeats. For a moment, the world stood still. No one moved. No one blinked. Then, as though awakened from a shared dream, the audience erupted into a standing ovation that rolled across the room like thunder, heard through a velvet night. Hands pounded the seats in front of them, feet stamped on the stage's edge, and tears sparkled on cheeks in every direction. Faces that had once feared difference now glowed with reverent appreciation. Strangers bound together by the miracle they had just witnessed. Jack stepped forward, bringing his guitar to rest at his side, and the three girls bowed low. Emma's hair spilled forward, and Lily's hand flew to her mouth in disbelief. Nora's knees bent so deeply she nearly touched the stage floor. They rose, blinking up into a sea of praise, and Jack joined them, father and daughters, triumphant together. The ovation swelled again, a wave of sound that carried them into memory, a benediction that sealed their journey. Backstage, they collapsed into one another's arms, hearts-pounding voices still singing in their veins. Emma's whisper trembled with awe. Did we really do that?" Lily's laughter bubbled free, and Nora nodded so fiercely her braid swung against her cheek. Jack enveloped them in a hug, his voice thick. "You did it. You owned that stage." Emma's eyes glistened as she scanned their surroundings. Costume racks, empty folding chairs, the scent of old pine and stage makeup. "It wasn't perfect," she said quietly, "but it was ours." Jack kissed the top of her head. "Perfect doesn't matter. You were honest." They lingered for a moment, letting the afterglow settle into their bones. Jack reached into his coat and pulled out his phone, replaying the taped recording he'd captured from the front row. The screen glowed with their faces bathed in spotlight. Emma watched herself singing, her voice cracking once before soaring back into tune, Lily's smile shining Nora's eyes bright as stars. Tears slipped down Emma's cheeks, and Lily reached for a tissue, dabbing at her own wet lashes. "You'll want to keep this," Jack said softly, offering the phone to Emma. She took it, fingers brushing his, and pressed play again. The playback filled the small room, 4 minutes of reclaimed courage and shared triumph. Emma pressed the phone to her chest. "Thank you," she whispered, voice unsteady. Jack nodded, wrapping an arm around her sisters. Nora leaned in, her head resting against Emma's shoulder. Footsteps echoed in the hall, and a teacher poked her head around the door. Jack, Emma. "The principal wants to meet you in the lobby," she said. "He'd like to congratulate you personally." Emma straightened, looking suddenly small in the doorway's frame. Lily squeezed her hand. "Go on," Jack urged. "You've got this." Emma exhaled, nodded, and gathered Lily and Nora close for one more collective breath before they stepped out into the corridor. They emerged into the warm, backlit lobby where the principal waited, his stern features softened by tears in his eyes. He reached out, shaking their hands in turn. "That was one of the most beautiful performances I've ever heard," he said. "Not just talent, but truth. You reminded us why we come together." Emma blinked back her tears. I didn't think I'd ever sing again," she confessed. The principal knelt so he was at eye level. "You showed all of us that some voices only need one chance," he said. Lily and Nora beamed, and Emma allowed herself a small, radiant smile. Jack leaned against the wall, pride etched into his posture. The principal stepped back and gestured them toward the exit. "Everyone's waiting to see you," he said. "Go enjoy this moment." As they walked toward the double doors, the chatter of other students and parents washed over them like applause. Strangers reached out to shake their hands, snap photographs, and offer congratulations. Outside, the night air was crisp, carrying the distant hum of traffic and snow crunching underfoot. Emma paused on the steps, gazing up at the glittering marquee Winter Talent Showcase, a night to remember. She looked at Lily and Nora, who mirrored her wonder. Jack joined them, pulling all three close under his coat. "We'll walk through that door as a family," he said. Emma nodded, linking arms with her sisters. They stepped off the curb and into the bright glow of streetlights and celebration. In the car ride home, Emma replayed snippets of the performance in her mind, the way her voice had found its note again. The twins' harmonies like wings carrying her higher. Jack's chords filling every gap of silence. Lily and Nora fell asleep in the back seat, their heads lolling against one another, smiles still on their faces. Jack parked by the cabin, switched off the engine, and watched his daughter's slumbering forms. He glanced at Emma beside him, exhaustion mixing with elation in her eyes. He reached across and took her hand. "Do you feel it?" he whispered. Emma nodded, her grip tightening. "I feel alive." Jack pressed his forehead to hers. "You gave us something we'll never forget." Emma exhaled, and the night settled around them, soft, serene, full of promise. In the hush, Jack Harper knew that silence had been conquered that night, replaced forever by the echo of three brave voices that dared to sing. That afternoon, Jack Harper found the letter slipped under the door while he was chopping firewood. The envelope was thick and formal, embossed with the district seal. He carried it into the kitchen where Emma and the twins were recounting every breath of their standing ovation moment over mugs of cocoa. The girls' laughter faltered when Jack's face, usually so open, tightened with concern. He cleared his throat and slit the envelope with calm fingers. "Your group does not meet district policy," he read aloud. Voice steady but grave. Non-enrolled participants are ineligible for official district events. Therefore, the Silent Three may not be included in any future showcases or juried performances. The rest of the letter, signed by the Director of Youth Arts Participation, fell away in a blur. Emma's hand went cold around her mug. Lily's and Nora's bright eyes dimmed. Emma set her cocoa down and looked straight into Jack's eyes. "They can't stop us," she said, voice low but unwavering. Jack folded the letter and tucked it into his pocket. He stared at the twins, 9 and 10 years old, whose innocent faith in music had unlocked Emma's voice and now risked being snuffed out by bureaucracy. He recalled every small triumph, the hums in the garage, the notes on stage, the silent promise of 3 hearts beating in harmony. He swallowed hard and exhaled. "No," he said, voice firm. "They can't." The girls exchanged glances, hope rekindled, bright and determined. Emma rose from her seat, scooped up her lyric notebook, and flung open the pages to a blank section marked Song for the Silent. She tapped her pen on the paper. "We'll record it ourselves," she declared. "We'll send it directly to the jury. Let them judge our hearts." Jack didn't hesitate. "Let's set up in the garage," he said, recalling how the space's echo had first captured their humming. He stacked wood against the stove and hurried outside to gather gear. Emma and the twins followed, excitement replacing their momentary despair. The afternoon light filtered through frosted windows as Jack carried in his old condenser mic and laptop from the living room. Emma unplugged the recorder labeled Echoes of Hope and plugged in fresh cables. The twins dragged in the Adirondack chair and placed their notebooks on the workbench, ready for every lyrical detail. Jack found fresh batteries for the mic, while Emma scribbled final edits to the chorus. "For those who can't speak, our voices carry their dreams." She read it quietly to Lily and Nora, who nodded solemnly. They settled on the bench, sharing a single copy of the lyric sheet. Jack tapped the record button and picked up his guitar, the polished wood glowing where the afternoon sun slipped in. Emma pressed the mic's foam windscreen over the capsule. "Whenever you're ready," Jack said softly. Emma's fingers curled around the mic stand. She inhaled deeply, recalling the auditorium's hush and the thunderous ovation that followed. Lily hummed the opening harmony below her breath, and Nora counted a silent beat. Then Emma began, voice-centered and clear, each word enunciated with care. Her tone quivered only where the emotion peaked, a fragile bridge to the listener's heart. Jack strummed chords beneath her, pressing into the guitar's body, as if channeling every ounce of protective love he felt for his daughter and the twins. The twins added their voices. Lily's undercurrent full and gentle, Nora's higher harmonies like doves taking flight. The garage walls trembled with the trio's imperfect yet perfect unity. When the final note faded, Jack clicked stop on the recorder. The tape whirred to a halt, leaving a ringing silence. Emma brought the mic down and exhaled, cheeks flushed with relief. Lily and Nora glanced at each other, wide-eyed with wonder at what they'd just created. Jack leaned forward and replayed the take, the raw audio crackling through the speakers. He watched their faces as Emma's voice soared again, carrying their shared story beyond any stage. "That was beautiful," he said, voice thick. "We'll send it now." Emma nodded and filled out the online submission form, typing the Silent Three under group name. Where the form asked for eligibility, she wrote, "Our hearts belong here." Jack hovered behind her, guiding her finger to click upload. The progress bar creeped across the screen, and then confirmation. The jury had their song. That evening, they shared a quiet dinner in the soft glow of lantern light. The tension from the letter melted into camaraderie, whispers of hope, rehearsed chords humming under the table. Jack looked around at his daughter and the twins, their smiles gentle but unyielding. He felt a fierce pride that transcended policy statistics or rules. Music, he realized, wasn't about checkpoints on a rubric. It was about truth, vulnerability, and the courage to share what others' silence might hide. Late at night, Emma sat by the recorder and pressed play again, her voice ringing clear in the still cabin. She smiled and closed her eyes, picturing distant ears hearing her message. Lily and Nora drifted off to sleep on their quilts, dreams free of exclusion. Jack peeked into their room, watched Emma slip under her covers, and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You did the right thing," he whispered. Emma turned eyes bright in the moonlight and nodded. In the hush that followed, Jack slipped out to stand by the window, gazing at the stars above the snow-blanketed landscape. His heart swelled with hope. Rules might bend, policies might exclude, but no letter could silence what music had set free. And as long as a single note found its way from a brave girl's lips, their song would transcend any boundary, carrying their hearts straight to anyone who was ready to listen. The old church basement smelled of pine pews and musty hymnals stacked on folding tables by the back wall. Fluorescent bulbs flickered overhead, casting long shadows between the mismatched chairs lined up in rows. Tonight, the silent three, Emma Harper, Lily Brooks, and Nora Brooks, stepped onto the makeshift stage, Jack Harper beside them with his guitar. The twins' breaths came in unison, their harmonies practiced but still trembling like newborn birds. Emma touched the microphone, feeling its cool metal under her fingertips, and for a moment the only sound was her own heartbeat. Jack launched into the first chord, warm and steady, and Emma's voice rose to meet it. Lily and Nora wove in their voices, low and bright, and the ancient walls absorbed their song like an offering. Eyes closed, Emma sang of silence, broken by courage, of quiet souls finding strength in shared melody. In the front row, a veteran with bands of ribbons on his jacket sat, rigid eyes glistening. A teenage girl hunched in the back, arms crossed to hide bruises and tears. Somewhere near her, a little boy clutched his mother's coat, entranced. When the final note faded, the veteran's applause thundered, the teen's cheers chimed, and the boy ran forward to hug Emma's knees. Her smile trembled but shone, and Lily and Nora joined him, small hands reaching for his in return. The next stop was the town library, where sunlight slanted through tall windows and ancient wooden shelves created cozy alcoves. The librarians whispered excitedly as the trio set up on a raised platform carpeted in burgundy. Jack tuned his guitar while Emma flipped through pages of her lyric notebook for a special piece written for shy listeners. The audience, mostly children and their grandparents, gathered on beanbags and rocking chairs. When Emma's soft opening note began, a hush fell like snowfall. Lily and Nora's harmonies drifted among the stacks, turning the library into a sanctuary. Afterward, a shy girl in glasses peeked forward and asked, "Could you teach me that part?" Emma knelt beside her, guiding small hands to her throat and then to the air above her chest. A single brave hum emerged, breaking a longer silence than Emma once knew. By dusk, they arrived at the recovery center in a converted storefront down by the river. The smell of antiseptic mingled with fresh coffee from a corner kiosk. Inside, rows of folding chairs faced a portable stage. Nurses and counselors seated their clients, men and women in various stages of healing, while Jack tested a single microphone. Emma perched between Lily and Nora on stools, their feet dangling above a scuffed linoleum floor. A counselor introduced them, voice warm but thick with feeling. Emma began, voice clear in the cool air, weaving stories of hope and resilience. As Lily and Nora joined, several women wiped tears with knitted scarves, and a man in a wheelchair closed his eyes, letting the sound cradle him. When the last chord faded, the applause was quiet but profound, as though each listener clapped for themselves. That evening, the trio returned to the cabin by headlights cutting through drifting snow. Jack set down his guitar and poured steaming mugs of cocoa. Ellis, the Harper family friend and tour manager, spread out a map on the kitchen table. Next week, she said, tracing a route to a women's shelter in the neighboring county and then the Veterans Hall in Merritt. Lily gasped at the long names. Nora traced the roads with her finger, and Emma leaned in, absorbing every plan. The fire crackled, and the recorder labeled Echoes of Hope sat ready on the mantel, each new performance captured as proof that music could travel farther than any rule or boundary. The following Monday, they pitched their portable stage in a cramped community center behind a faded brick school. The smell of popcorn and sweat mingled in the hot gym, and teenage boys in leather jackets drifted in after basketball practice. Jack glanced warily at a group of boys leaning by a water fountain, arms folded and faces bored. Emma stepped onto the platform, heart pounding. A hush grew as her first note trembled out. No one laughed. Lily's warm hum threaded through the air, and Nora's bright soprano wove above it, until the trio's voices formed a single ribbon of sound that wound through the gym like wind in autumn leaves. When the final chord fell, the basketball players high-fived each other, heads nodding in unspoken understanding. One boy approached afterward, offering Emma a small token, a friendship bracelet he'd braided himself. Emma accepted it, smiling as Nora and Lily squeezed her hands. By Thursday, the Silent Three found themselves in a rural church that doubled as a food pantry on weekdays. Bales of hay lined the corners, and the stage was nothing more than a raised platform of old oak planks. Farmers in flannel and boots sat cross-legged on the floor, weary from early mornings in frosted fields. Emma inhaled, remembering the words of her song, "A voice can be a seed that grows in the hearts of others." She began, voice clear and fearless. Lily's and Nora's harmonies filled the rafters, and the farmers tapped their boots in chairs in time, some standing to clap along. An old man with a crooked grin leaned on his cane and whistled beneath his breath. When the last sound faded, the farmers rose en masse, eyes, shining hands echoing the rhythm of hearts renewed. Late that night, as Jack and Ellis packed gear back into the van, Emma, Lily, and Nora sat under the bare bulb of the community center's back room. The twins hummed a lullaby they'd learned, and Emma closed her eyes, letting the echo carry her into memory. Lily glanced at Emma and whispered, "We're doing something good here." Emma nodded, tears in her eyes. Nora reached out and took her hand, their fingers entwining like melody threads. Jack peeked around the door and said, "You three should get some rest. Tomorrow we drive to Hastings." The twins yawned in unison, squeezing Emma's hand. Emma looked at Jack and said softly, "Dad, I think music is exactly where we belong." As they filed out into the chill night air, Jack placed an arm around Emma's shoulders. The stars glimmered above the empty parking lot, and the van's headlights cut paths through drifting snow flurries. Emma rested her head against Jack's arm and awoke the music inside her, humming the lullaby that had first unlocked her voice. Lily and Nora fell into step beside them, their harmonies a soft echo in the still air. Jack watched the three figures, his daughter and her steadfast friends, marching toward tomorrow, hearts open, voices ready to heal every wounded corner they encountered. In that moment, he knew their echo tour was more than a journey through small towns and forgotten stages. It was a pilgrimage of hope, each song a beacon guiding lost souls back to the warmth of being heard. The Lincoln Civic Center lobby buzzed with anticipation as Emma Harper slipped through the side doors with her father's guitar case in hand. The Youth Voices Gala felt different from every other stage the Silent Three had graced. Here, the chandeliers hung like constellations above velvet drapes, and polished oak floors reflected the chatter of local dignitaries, scholarship judges, and families clutching programs printed on thick cardstock. Emma's pulse thrummed in her ears, but she let Jack's steady hand rest on the small of her back, anchoring her to the familiar warmth of his presence. Lily and Nora followed close behind their matching navy dresses, swaying in unison. They paused at a mirror in the green room, three reflections framed by soft lights. Emma adjusted her collar, long accustomed to hiding behind sweaters and scarves, but tonight she stood tall. Her voice, once buried beneath 2 years of silence, felt as integral as her own breath. Lily fixed a single curl that had escaped its pin, and Nora offered Emma a confident grin. "We've got this," Lily whispered, and Nora nodded fiercely. Emma turned to them, her heart swelling with gratitude, and in that mirrored moment she saw not only herself, but the three voices that had risen together from a snowy cabin in Nebraska. A soft knock at the door signaled their cue. The stage manager's voice called 10 seconds to curtain. Emma inhaled, tasting the promise of possibility on her tongue. She bent down to adjust Jack's guitar strap, then rose to stand before the heavy curtain. Lily and Nora slipped into place beside her, their hands brushing in a silent ritual of solidarity. Jack tucked his hand into Emma's back pocket for a moment before he crossed a stage-left guitar in hand, ready to begin. The red velvet curtain parted with a quiet swoosh. A single spotlight found Emma isolating her figure against the darkness beyond. The audience exhaled as one, and for a heartbeat the world held its breath. Emma lifted the microphone and glanced at Jack, who offered a reassuring nod. She felt the wood of his guitar case warm in her palm, a tangible reminder that she was never alone up here. Jack's first chord rippled through the hall, low and resonant, a heartbeat beneath the hush. Emma closed her eyes, summoning every lesson learned in church basements, libraries, and the echo-filled garage. Her fingers tightened around the mic stand as she exhaled into her song. The opening line emerged clear and unwavering. In the quiet, we gather our stories. In the stillness, our voices take flight. Her voice quivered only at the edges, a gentle tremor that spoke of vulnerability, and then steadied into a soft, confident melody. Lily's harmonies wove in on Emma's second verse. Threads of warmth and support, while Nora's soprano joined like starlight piercing twilight. The trio's voices rose together, weaving a tapestry of sound, so intimate it felt as if each listener's ear had become a sacred space. Jack's guitar anchored them, each strum a pulse that carried their harmonies forward. Emma's eyes flicked to the audience, a scout in a crisp suit, a counselor clutching a program to her chest, a teenager with painted fingernails pressed against her hand, a little boy in the front row whose mother wiped tears from her cheek. Emma sang for each of them, each note a promise that their stories mattered, that their silences were not endings, but beginnings. As the song built toward its bridge, Jack shifted closer, his chords rippling like gentle waves. Emma leaned into the crescendo, her voice soaring above the music, unafraid. She thought of the abandoned shipping container where Lily and Nora had trembled in the snow, and of the first note she had ever hummed at her father's invitation. She thought of every doubt she had crushed beneath her courage, every rule that sought to silence her, and every heart that had opened in response. The bridge spoke of resilience. We are echoes of hope, unbroken by fear. We are voices reborn, and we've always been here. When she sang the final chorus, Lily and Nora stepped forward. Harmonies entwined, and Jack's guitar arpeggiated beneath them like wind through pine branches. Emma felt the chords reverberate through her chest, rising in a triumphant arc that felt like flight. At the song's end, she let the last note hang suspended in the stillness like prayer. Then utter silence. For a moment, no one dared to breathe. The light above Emma faded to a soft glow that bathed the trio in warmth. She opened her eyes to find the audience transfixed, held in that shared hush. And then, as though released from a spell, the crowd erupted, not with raucous cheering, but with a reverent standing ovation that felt holy in its gentleness. Hands rose in unison, footsteps pounded the floor beneath rows of chairs, and tears glistened on cheeks. Emma's throat tightened as Jack crossed to her side, lifting the guitar into a final chord of celebration. Lily and Nora linked arms with Emma, and the three sisters in song took a humble, heart-stilled bow. The applause swelled again, a wave of sound that rolled across the room, lifting the three of them higher than any stage light could ever reach. Backstage, they leaned against the wings, breathless and awash in the afterglow. Emma's voice, unspoken for so long, had found its home in the sacred hush that followed their final note. Lily wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, and Nora's grin was so wide it seemed to light the entire hall. Jack wrapped both girls in a generous embrace before pulling Emma into his arms. "You were extraordinary," he whispered, voice thick with pride. Emma pressed her cheek to his shoulder, savoring the moment, proof that some voices born in silence resonate the loudest. They walked into the lobby where friends, teachers, and even the director of youth arts participation gathered to congratulate them. The director offered Emma his hand, eyes shining. "Your performance reminded us all of the power of genuine voices," he said. Emma nodded, her voice still catching. "Thank you for listening," she managed. People pressed flowers into their hands, offered ribbons of commendation, invited them to future events. But Emma's mind lingered on the echo of that final chord, the reverence that met their shared song. Later, as the lobby emptied and the grand hall fell silent once more, Jack led his daughters outside into the crisp Lincoln night. The marquee lights of the Civic Center glowed behind them, casting their long shadows across the steps. Emma cradled her father's guitar case, its edges worn by years of travel, and every heartbeat song they'd shared. Lily and Nora nestled close their heads against Emma's sides. Jack wrapped his coat around all three of them, the tripod of warmth and sanctuary they had become. Under the stars, the three girls, once silenced, once frightened, stood victorious. Emma tilted her head back, eyes closed, and let the night wind carry the remnants of their harmonies across the city. She felt the resonance in her bones, a sacred hush that had become her song. And in that hush, she understood when they had stepped into the spotlight together, they had ignited something far greater than applause. They had awakened silent hearts, turned whispers into voices, and shown that the most powerful crescendos often begin in the quietest places.